Hey, good Tuesday morning, everybody. Welcome into the Volquest podcast presented by Exterior Home Solutions. That phone number for a free estimate, 865-524-5888 online at exteriorhomesolutions.com. They've been local and trusted since 1999. That is Exterior Home Solutions. Busy time for Tennessee athletics right now. Tennessee basketball fresh off an SEC tournament run heading into the NCAA tournament, a 2 seed in the Midwest region. We'll discuss that. Tennessee baseball remains undefeated. That win streak at 22 games can tie for a program-long win streak of 23 games with a win tonight against ETSU, but heading on the road to Tuscaloosa, Alabama this weekend. And, of course, Tennessee football, 4 practices in the books. They're on spring break right now, but coming back to finish off spring football practice next week. So much going on right now. But Rob Lewis, the Tennessee basketball team, how would you assess where they are entering the NCAA tournament?
I think you have to feel pretty good about it. I thought they had a really good weekend in Nashville. Something to like about every game except for really the final. And frankly, we could get into it more later, but I don't think you quibble a lot about the final. I mean, I was wildly impressed with Florida this weekend. I don't think Tennessee dropped the ball on Sunday, or I think the better team won that game for a lot of different reasons. But I think a 2 seed, feels right to me. I know some fans will disagree and you'll want the one besides your number, but I like Tennessee's path just on the surface of it. I haven't really done a deep dive, but from what I know, I don't think it's a horrible matchup, along the way there. Love the Lexington, Indiana locations for Tennessee. I mean, it's still going to be a tough ticket with Louisville in Lexington. I'm sure Auburn will probably travel pretty well. And if chalk holds, it'll be a really tough ticket in Indianapolis for that Sweet 16 game with Kentucky and Tennessee, which if that happens, man, that will be massive. And lastly, if of all the 1 seeds, I think you have to like the matchup with Houston, maybe the best, except for Auburn, just because you can beat them. But, playing a team 3 times, it's just, kind of quirky. But, Tennessee and Houston, I think, have a lot in common. I think that might be a first 1 to 60, goes to the Final Four game if that happens in the Elite Eight.
I'm with Rob. I think, and I've said this for 2 months when everybody was giving me a hard time on the general's quarters when I said, that for this team, it's all about making the Final Four. I mean, that's what this program needs, right? It's not about, the SEC tournament sure have been nice, SEC regular season, but like this program's never made a Final Four. And the path you got, Brent, is one that, man, sign me up for that. They could lose in the round of 32, but like there's nobody that just jumps out and goes, man, that's really tough. That's really hard. Like last year, you knew Purdue was a bad matchup. Kind of like you knew Florida was a bad matchup. You know, Tennessee won that game by 20 in Knoxville. Florida is just long. They're deep. They're really impressive, as Rob said. There's nothing about this path for Tennessee that just makes you go, oh, man, that's not good for the Vols if they get that matchup.
Unless it's Kentucky. Tennessee's played Kentucky twice, and Kentucky's scored the ball well against them, and obviously Tennessee's had a hard time defending Kentucky and getting enough stops. Now they were there in the last 4 minutes in Lexington and didn't finish that game out. That was a tied game, and they had a chance. In Knoxville, Tennessee got out of sort of who they are and shot a bunch of threes, but they're 0-2 against Kentucky. You're not fearing Kentucky, but
is it the same thing with the injuries?
Well, but they're going to get some guys back. It looks like. I don't think they're going to be.
They were banged up the second time they played them too. So
yeah, they've been banged up all year. So I think Tennessee. I think Tennessee's been the better team than Kentucky probably all season long. Rob, they just haven't played well against them, and who knows if Kentucky gets there. But yeah, I started looking around. I don't. It's supposed to be hard. Okay, that's the point. Nobody's supposed to get a wide open path to the Final Four where you're a double-digit favorite all the way through. There's supposed to be tough matchup games. To your point, Austin, last year when you saw Purdue in that region and you're like, okay, that's the regional final game. You're like, well, that's Final Four game because A, Purdue was really good, and B, you'd seen them earlier in the year, you'd played them, you knew how difficult of a matchup that would be. I think that point is exactly right. I do think if you can get to that game in a regional final, you like your matchup this year versus Houston better than you liked your matchup last year versus Purdue. I agree with that 100%.
Rob, how would you assess Tennessee's play, how it's playing right now entering the NCAA tournament? You had a big stat on the board on Sunday when you compared the bigs from Florida to Tennessee. Obviously, they've got to be more productive, but the way Tennessee's playing defensively, Jazz, Akai, everybody involved entering the NCAA tournament.
I mean, it's not perfect and it's not seamless, but man, I just feel like, I guess the best way to say it is I think you have 7 or 8 guys that have a really good understanding of what they need to do to win. Now, it's not going to look like Florida does when they're scoring 100 points and running up and down the court, but I mean, Rick Barnes has a group of older guys that know how they need to play and what needs to happen for them to win basketball games. And in light of that, I mean, I think they're playing pretty well. I mean, I think they beat heck, they beat the number 1 seed in the South region on Saturday and really took them apart in the last 10 minutes when Auburn looked like they had the upper hand in it. So don't let what happened on Sunday against Florida disabuse you of what where this team is right now and what they've done, and that's the great thing about this tournament, because less than an hour after that happened, you pretty much forgot about the loss and you're on to what's next, what's the matchup going to be, and what the possibilities are. So I think they're in a pretty good spot. And again, AP already mentioned it, they could lose in the round of 32. It wouldn't surprise anybody if they caught Utah State and they just happened to shoot the eyes out that day. But, I like this bracket. And I frankly like the fact for Tennessee that Kentucky's there. You get the old cliche, it's hard to beat a team, 3 times. And I think it's especially hard to beat a team when, the matchups and the body of work would say that the one team that's already lost twice is the better squad.
Yeah, I think when you look at, for me, when I look at matchups, and Barnes talks about this when I was asking him last week on Volquest about the difference between being a 1 seed and a 2 seed. And he was like, it's a number, because your bracket's all about your draw and all about your matchups. I think when you look at that bracket, I think the one thing that kind of stands out, I've seen Houston play. They're tough and they're physical. I don't know, Rob, that they are just ginormously gargantuan in the post.
No, they are not, Hubbard. They don't have a ton of size at all. I mean, now they play big, they play hard, they still rebound at a really high level, but they don't have 6'10", 6'11", 7-foot guys. They don't have a single 7-footer that plays.
Yeah, and I think that's kryptonite for Tennessee. I mean, I think that's you had the stat, but I mean, and look, give Walter Clayton Jr. credit. He made every play that when Florida had to have an answer, he made an answer. But the difference in that game was offensive rebounding and what Florida could do to Tennessee in the post. So you're trying to avoid matchups like that. And I think when you look at the bracket, I don't know that you look at anybody in this bracket and go, man, that they're just elite in the post. And that's a real challenging matchup, which is back to Austin's point of why this feels like it's a better draw than a year ago, because you don't have a 7-footer in the post that you're trying to defend. And Florida's posts were physical and, I mean, they're deep. I mean, Florida's playing as well as anybody in the country right now. There's a reason they're everybody's darling pick to win it all. And I don't know if they will or they won't, or if they'll get there or whatever. You never know with the tournament. But they're as complete. They're more complete than Tennessee because of what they can do in the post. And Tennessee needs to avoid teams that are just really, really physically dominant in the post. And it looks like they have in this bracket for the most part.
And Rob, you look at kind of going into Sunday, and the talk was, you look at the bracketologists and the latest projections and all that, and that's not the end all be all. I understand that, and now it doesn't matter because Tennessee didn't win on Sunday. But how crazy would it have been if Tennessee did finish that thing on Sunday, and you beat Auburn and Florida in consecutive days? Yet it didn't matter because the bracket was all done Saturday night, and Tennessee did not get that number 1 seed. I mean that. We talked about it a lot last week and talked about how if there's ever a year that the SEC tournament championship game has got to matter, it's got to be this year. You were almost in that spot to where it wasn't going to matter again. It would have been crazy, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would have been. And I don't know what would have happened. I mean, certainly, Lenardi changed his tone, big time Sunday morning. And I wonder if that was really, really something he saw in, a PDF file, or if somebody had one of his bosses had said, hey, quit, talking about how this game we're getting ready to, broadcast for 3 hours doesn't mean anything, nationally. But Jerry Palm the same way. I mean, Jerry Palm, came out pretty strongly, I think, first on with with his numbers and said that pretty emphatically that Tennessee would be a 1 seed. So it would have been wild to see, and it would have been controversial. Tennessee would have been right in the middle of it for just the reasons you mentioned. EC, they would have had beaten 2 number 1 seeds in 24 hours and not gotten the benefit of it. But I tell you, I think they did get a pretty substantial benefit because I think them and Alabama swapped places.
Yeah,
because of what happened in Nashville. I think it's way preferable for Tennessee to be in Lexington as opposed to Raleigh. And I don't think Duke's unbeatable. I know if you look at some of the numbers out there, I mean, they're historical. I mean, they're Ken Pom numbers are up there with, or it's not Ken Pom, it's either, I think it's Torvik. Anyway, their computers are off the chart. I mean, if they were the UConn teams for the past couple of years. Point being, I think Tennessee swapped places with Bama. The numbers say Houston's a much better matchup than Duke, and I think it's far preferable to be Lexington, Indy, as opposed to Raleigh, Newark.
Yeah, I mean, I think what happened in Nashville on Saturday was the biggest win for Tennessee, because Tennessee won and Alabama lost, and that flipped it, as you mentioned, Rob. I think that was a huge deal. And again, I'm not opposed. I mean, I don't think being a 2 seed is the worst thing in the world. I know it's cool to say you're a number 1 seed, but I think a 2 seed where you're playing in a locale that your fans can get to is better than going and playing on the West Coast, which is what Florida is going to end up doing. And look, I don't think UConn's very good, but I mean, that's an interesting 8-9 game, and a potential second round game for Florida that you kind of looked at and went, well, if we get UConn, they know how to win this time of year. So you're going to have your hands full there. So I think Saturday was the win, Rob.
And you talk about matchups. I mean, I'm not an expert on any of these teams. But I watch a lot of college basketball. I would much rather play Houston, even if they are 1 seed right now, than St. John's if that's who I'm facing in the regional final, no question.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not an expert
in that one little region in Providence, by the way. I mean, for just the coaching star power, Gallinari, Bill Self, and Patino. I mean, guys that are long in the tooth but still getting it done, especially Patino, who just, it doesn't matter where he goes, produces.
And who is at the stage of his career will say absolutely anything.
He's like an 80-year-old man that is like no filter. I'm letting it all fly.
He's going to have probably some legendary sound bites coming out of this weekend with as much media is going to be, as many microphones that are going to be in front of him.
Yeah, I think I agree with you guys. I mean, he's certainly become a very entertaining soundbite for sure, because you never know what's going to come out of there. I think the other big picture thing when you look at not necessarily Tennessee in the bracket, but the bracket in general is you continue to put yourself back into this world that you have no idea, Rob, what the committee is really looking at. Right? We spend 3 months talking about quad 1 wins, right? Quad 1 wins. It's all about the quad 1 win. That's the whole thing. And then you get to the end, and the blue blood North Carolina gets in. They don't have the quad 1 wins. West Virginia gets left out. And I think you're standing here, and you do this every Monday after the bracket. There's fewer teams this year than in years past because there wasn't enough bid stealers out there in conference tournaments. But you still don't have any idea what the committee is looking at. I mean, you still don't know what really counts, do we, Rob?
Yeah, they're looking at bonuses. $100,000 bonuses.
Yeah, I'm sure Bubba Cunningham really needs that money there at this point in his life. But I mean, is it quad 1? Is it quad 2? Good losses, bad losses, good wins, bad wins, quad 1, quad 3. I mean, we still don't really know what all the metrics are that people look, and nobody's going to ever inform you on what they're looking for.
8-0 in quad 2, Rob. That's North Carolina, man. They earned it, right?
I don't follow them super closely, but I mean, I know enough about them to know that they are a very average basketball team.
1-12 in quad 1 games.
Yeah, I'm aware of that number, and I think I don't agree with Jay Billis on a lot, but I do think we spend too much time talking about the bottom of the bracket, that the teams that get in on Selection Sunday. But man, the UNC thing is just. It looks pretty bad on the face of it when your resume is that weak and your AD is the chairman of the committee. I think it was just a really bad look. But again, we're talking about some teams that were below 500 in their conference and may not make it out of Dayton. But it was ugly. And West Virginia's not great. They had some bad losses, but their numbers were pretty clearly better than UNC. I thought that one was pretty ugly.
And then the committee to insinuate that injury was a concern. The injured player for West Virginia hadn't played since December.
And if you're giving UNC any credit at all for being in the ACC, which was terrible, you contradicted yourself with what you did to Louisville, an 8 seed who lost only 2 games in that conference. I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think Louisville's seeding is arguably as bad as North Carolina getting in. I mean, when you look at it, I mean,
that's a sneaky game too, and the second round potentially.
How are you? You mentioned Auburn and Lexington.
I mean, how are you an 8 seed with what you've done this year? I mean, again, you're always going to pick it apart, right? You're always going to pick the bracket completely apart. But I just think there's so much, it's kind of beat into your brain when you start doing bracketology in November and you do it, for 3 months and everybody talks about quad one. Everything's quad one related. And then quad one doesn't seem to matter with some at the end, which I think is always fascinating. So, but for Tennessee, I won't say it's the perfect draw. You're never going to get a perfect draw, but it's about as good of a layout as you could want it to be. And Tennessee's earned it. And they earned it in part because they won on Saturday against Auburn in a high quality game, and Florida beat Alabama on Saturday. And I think it's put Tennessee in a much better, in a better position for their fans, for this team with what the matchups look like than it would have been had Tennessee lost that game to Auburn.
We've talked about the path. We've talked about teams that you think Tennessee could match up well against and hypothetical matchups or maybe down the line. Who's a team that you don't want to see, Tennessee have any part of in this tournament that's playing, really well right now?
Well, I mean, we mentioned Kentucky. I mean, on paper, if Kentucky plays like they did in Knoxville and shoots 50% from the floor, and Tennessee gets lulled into taking what 45 or some ridiculous number.
Yeah,
I mean 40 plus. I mean, that's a bad matchup. But man, again, I could be wrong. I just go back to it's not based on analytics. I think it's hard to beat a team 3 times in the same year, and I just think I think Kentucky it was a perfect storm a couple of nights. I think it's weird to say that since they beat them twice, and you wouldn't think it wasn't a fluke, but I think Tennessee's better, and I get back to Tennessee is legit. I don't know where the numbers are after the conference tournament last week. They were number 1 in the country defending the 3-point line. Kentucky lives and dies by it. The fact that Tennessee got bit by that snake twice, I have to think that's an anomaly.
Well, I mean, I thought they settled for too many threes early against Florida in that game, but then offensively they got back. To me, the big takeaway from the SEC tournament was Tennessee's offensive identity after the first few minutes of that Florida game. Look at the number of times Tennessee got to the free throw line in Nashville. I mean, they were downhill. They were aggressive. I thought Jordan Gainey was really good at getting to the rim, getting to the free throw line. I think Tennessee's got to continue to be in attack mode that way, whether it's their post scoring, Rob, or their post or not scoring. They got to play the ball. They got to put the ball through the paint. I thought they did. They were more consistent with that in Nashville than they've been for most of the year. I thought that was a big thing. I think Dubar showing a pulse is a positive. I think the question is, can you get a pulse out of Igor, Rob, and get back on track?
Too, I think. I mean, you say that, but they didn't get a lot out of him on Saturday and beat a number 1 seed in Auburn. But I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think he's going to have to stay out of foul trouble on the floor for one thing. Because I think foul trouble affects a lot of guys. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it feels like when Igor starts getting in foul trouble, it gets in his head and really kind of takes him out of his game. And that certainly to me seemed to be the case this weekend. But you're talking about the way they play, Hubbard putting it more on the guards, getting downhill. This is looking way down the road. And again, I'm not an expert on Houston yet, and I won't be. I'll know more about them. But I know that they play. They want to force a ton of turnovers. They get out. They really extend on your guards. They want to put a ton of pressure on your guards. you would think that would really play into Tennessee's hands if that's the regional matchup. There's no more veteran, no more guy I would trust more in that situation probably than Zakai in that kind of matchup.
Last thing I have on basketball, I know Rick Barnes doesn't like it, but it is what it is. You got to go on and play the games. You played on Sunday now in the conference championship, and you got the early draw, the Thursday, Saturday instead of Friday, Sunday. Huge disadvantage for Tennessee. What's the week look like, Rob, in terms of practice and trying to kick back and get some rest? What's that look like for Tennessee this week?
I mean, the first couple of days will be more about rest and rehab, especially since they played Sunday. Man, I don't know if people really appreciate how playing 3 high-level games like that will take it out of you. I mean, and it was intense. I mean, both those teams wanted to win on Sunday. I mean, everybody says, mail it in, it's better. And yeah, theoretically it would be, but that's not what happened. And I mean, today is all about just rehabbing where you at, getting your legs back. And the coaches are hardcore, grinding on film. But and tomorrow, I would imagine will be a pretty light day as well, but more starting to focus on Wofford, ramping that up in film work, and then they'll travel Wednesday. They'll do media in Lexington. They'll practice in Rupp Arena, and then they'll go off site to probably to a local high school or small college and have another practice somewhere as well. But Hubbard, why they play it on Sunday and don't start it earlier? It's just it baffles me.
Well, it's all about money. I mean, that whole tournament's all about money, and it's trying to figure out a way to make the most money you can make. And do you get more fans in town for that event on Saturday and Sunday because you don't have to take off from work and that type of deal, and for the money. But if you polled every coach in this league and you said, hey, you can play that game at noon on Saturday or at 1:00 on Saturday or 1:00 on Sunday, everybody's going to take Saturday. And I think the league has to look at this. I mean, I do. I mean, I know they can't get a great TV window because of what the ACC has at night. And I think the Big 12's got the 4:00 game for their championship. But, I mean, why not end the regular season midweek and then, you finish that up on Wednesday night and you start your tournament the following Tuesday? I mean, there's better rest for everybody. There's better recovery for everybody there. And then you can get it done, on a Saturday and you got an extra day off for everybody. I mean, I think Tennessee's fortunate in this draw because, one, it's a short bus ride. You're not flying across the country. You're not going to Spokane, Washington as a 5 seed like Auburn did a year ago. And you're not playing that noon game. You're playing in the evening time, which gives you a few more hours. I mean, the worst case scenario is you got to fly somewhere and play a noon game after playing your conference championship game on Sunday afternoon. Now, there are other conferences that do it that way. I think Yale played last year on Sunday and turned around and beat Auburn on Thursday. But no, I mean, I don't think it's an advantage for the conference to do it the way they're doing it right now, other than the fact that, they get the spotlight on Sunday afternoon because it's the biggest conference championship. But is it worth that? Again, I mean, you have a narrative out there, Austin, that the game doesn't mean anything from a seeding standpoint. So now you get back to, is it worth playing and all those types of things. And Rob said it best earlier. It's almost like somebody told Joe Lunardi, hey, quit talking like this game doesn't matter because we got 4 hours to talk about this game. So let's market it here. You know what I mean? And I think Greg Sankey's got to look at this. I think he should have looked at it the last 5 years, and I think it's got to continue to look at that. I mean, Tennessee's fortunate that they weren't playing in Tampa yesterday, fly home, at 6:00 last night, get home at 9, 10 o'clock, and then turn around and have to play at noon somewhere where you had to fly to on Saturday. That's what you don't want.
1,000%. I mean, look at Florida. I mean, they're flying home, and now, granted, they're flying home with a trophy, but I mean, it still boils down to Tennessee was much quicker back to the house because of the proximity of the tournament. The facts are Greg Sankey has made a living as the SEC commissioner being able to see things and make moves before he needed to make moves, right? And you talk about this, you talk about even with football and how the Big Ten has positioned itself in the CFP to where it looks like they are the one playing chess and the SEC is having to react to this. I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, at some point, you got to listen to your coaches, you got to listen to your administrators, and you got to do what's best for the overall league. And the best for the overall league doesn't always equate to money, because if you're shortchanging yourself on the field or on the court and not bringing home trophies, then some of that money gets lessened over time. And so I agree. I think that you should have made this move before this year. And you would think that, there'd be enough push, and especially if, an SEC team doesn't win the overall national title, to potentially do that a year from now.
We can fight, we can battle, we can discuss all week long about seeding and matchups and all that, but hey, at least there's no fans of LSU or South Carolina on this podcast, because, boy, the only two teams in the SEC that didn't make the dance, 14 of 16, shattering the previous record from the Big East in 2011, who had 11 teams. It'd be really, really bad if you were South Carolina or LSU this morning, because you didn't make the dance.
And I'll say this too. I mean, Rob, there's pressure on the SEC now.
Yep.
I mean, you better go show up the first weekend of the tournament as 14 teams in. You better not just get your rear end handed to you the first weekend. If you're going to be what everybody has pointed you out and portrayed you to be all season long. 14
teams, Rob. What's a successful first weekend? When you head to the Sweet 16, how many of the 16 have to be SEC teams for it to be a successful weekend for the league?
Yeah, but you have to look. I mean, there are quite a few potential round of 32 matchups.
There are
that are just unavoidable. I mean, Florida and Oklahoma. I mean, Oklahoma's not likely to make that one, but
Vanderbilt, Alabama.
Yeah, I mean I don't. So what are some other ones? Because you really need to break that down.
Would 8 of 16? Would 8 of 16 be a home run?
Oh, that would knock it out of the park, I would think. I think the bigger thing is your top teams have to get through. I mean, the teams you hang your hat on that carry the flag for your league. I mean, I think Tennessee. I think it's pretty imperative that Tennessee, Auburn, Florida, Alabama, maybe A&M. I mean, that the vast majority of the teams that are top, 3 or 4 seeds make it through. That to me, if Arkansas or Missouri or somebody slips through Mississippi, I think Mississippi State's one to watch. By the way, I'm not predicting they're going to beat Duke, but they won't be intimidated by that one at all. Did I get that matchup? Is that who they play? That's right.
I think that's
right. They do. Yeah. Duke will play Mississippi State or Baylor in the second round. And again, not predicted an upset, but Mississippi State will not be afraid of Duke. But that would be my measuring stick. The vast majority of your big dogs need to be playing the second weekend.
Yeah, I think your point is exactly right. It's not so much about number of teams. It's did your elite best teams who had all the quad 1 wins, right? Strength of schedule, all those things. Do they advance through? Do you avoid the big upset somewhere along the way with those upper tier teams? I think is the real challenge, right? I mean, because you're right. I mean, I think there's 3 games that are going to knock SEC teams going to knock an SEC team out potentially in the second round. But your big dogs have to be standing there, at the end. I mean, if Arkansas loses to Arizona, nobody's going to be surprised by that one. I mean, at all, right? I could see St. Mary's beating Vanderbilt, but what you can't, I mean, Alabama doesn't need to get upset in the first weekend. Tennessee, the teams Rob mentioned earlier, I think is the exact point about what is a good weekend for the league.
Tennessee takes on Wofford on Thursday. 6:50 is the game time, and of course, you win that one, you'll take on the winner of Utah State or UCLA on Saturday. Full coverage right here at Volquest.com. Rob Lewis and Grant Ramey, as always. All right, 4 practices in the books for Tennessee football. Who's on spring break right now? Biggest takeaway around the room that we've had for Tennessee football so far. That's coming up next as we continue on here with the Volquest podcast. But first, let's get a word from our friends over at Exterior Home Solutions.
Hey, Sterling, man, come on. We got a roof to replace.
Let's go, baby. It's game
time.
Let's go.
Hey, Sterling, you ready to go to the top?
Man, I can't believe you guys been doing this for 25 years. Oh, baby.
Now, this is what I call a rooftop party.
We have 25 years experience in roofing and exterior renovations, and we're backed by the best.
Are you ready to get your rooftop party started?
Give us a call, 865-524-5888.
Exterior Home Solutions, presenting sponsors of the Volquest podcast, 865-524-5888. You can check them out online as well at exteriorhomesolutions.com. They've been local, they've been trusted since 1999. That is Exterior Home Solutions. Are you ready to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well exciting. They're dietitian approved and ready to heat in 2 minutes so you can get fueled up and feel right, feel great for whatever life throws your way. Factor meals, fresh and fully prepared, perfect for your active, busy lifestyle. You can lose up to 8 pounds in 8 weeks with Factor Keto meals. Based on randomized controlled clinical trial with Factor Keto, results will vary depending on diet and exercise. 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on menu each week. It's easy to pick meals tailored to your goals. Choose from preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. Factor can help you feel your best all day long with wholesome smoothies, breakfasts, grab-and-go snacks, and so many more add-ons. You can reach your goal this year with ingredients that you can trust at the convenience that simply can't be beat. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast. Use that promo code FACTORPODCAST to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's promo code FACTORPODCAST at factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. All that and more. It's at Factor Meals. All right, full practices have been taken care of. Full pads last Friday. You take a week off. They'll come back and hit the practice field. I think Tuesday the 25th is the next time that they practice. But overall, Brent Hubbs, what's been a big takeaway that you've had from what you've seen so far for Tennessee spring practice?
I'm going to give you four right off the top, right quick, okay? One is I think the kind of the confidence and the relaxation of Nico. Not just in his media setting, but I've seen Nico walking through the complex more in 4 practices than I have in 2 years. Like he's just been strolling through, and he's been very engaging with people.
What's it mean though, Hubs?
I just think I don't know what it ultimately means. I think he's a little bit more settled into who he is.
Does he have the look in his eye?
No, I just like the way. I mean, listen, the guy went out the back door for 2 years, right? And he's not doing that. I like the way he's carried himself right now. I have no idea what that means in terms of whether or not they're going to connect on deep balls or anything like that. But I do like the way he's carried himself. I think Tennessee got exactly what you would hope they would get with the 2 offensive guard transfers. Those guys look like, act like, carry themselves like plug and play guys at the guard spot. How could you not enjoy Pendleton's interview? And I think Wendell Moy, I think those guys are exactly what you're hoping you would find with the whole transfer situation that you got into. I like what Braylon Staley has done to start, and talking to some people. I think Braylon's had a nice start to camp. How does that translate when you get into pads and scrimmages and all those things? We'll find out. Like the way he looks out there. And then I like what Josh Heupel's done with his coaching staff. I mean, I think Seth Luttrell's a really nice set of eyes that can help you there. And clearly Tim Banks has a lot of confidence in Alan Williams and has really kind of let him run in individual drills with the safeties and be a part of there. Of course, obviously Coach Chop with the outside linebackers. So those are my 4 quick hot takeaways right there.
AP, Hubbs is all about the flashy toys, right? Didn't mention defense one time.
Yeah, I did. I mentioned Alan Williams right there.
Okay, well, part of the coaching staff.
I mentioned that. I mean, here's the thing. Like, look, it says something that Rodney Garner, Rob, is complimenting 2 freshmen that they can take his coaching style. But I think all of us agree, and AP jump in here too. I mean, I like everything about Isaiah Campbell in terms of what he can be. I like everything about Ethan Utley and what he can be. And that's just a hard position to be really good at out of the gate. Now, they're going to have to play and be a part of that rotation, but I like all those guys, but I don't know about what kind of early impact they're going to make on this football team in 25.
Well, I think physically you come in the door, better than most, right?
Yeah, Utley's got to get bigger, man.
Campbell does, yeah.
He does, yes. But I'm with Hubbs. I mean, it's easy to fall in love with people right now. It's April. Or not even April yet. It's March. It's spring practice. And so what's the chatter out there come August? Because again, the last couple of years, the guys that you started to hear chatter on in spring, the ones that actually made it through to actually playing real factored snaps in the fall, were the ones you kept hearing about through May, through June, through July. And they just kept talking about them. They kept talking about them. Who are they continuing to talk about? A lot of people, 2 years ago, people talked about John Slaughter during bowl practice and in spring practice like Ronnie Lott. And we've yet to ever see John Slaughter. So, you know what I'm saying? I
don't disagree.
Whereas
I'm still waiting on John Slaughter.
So,
because of your war room paragraph, AP, I think.
Wasn't mine. Was not mine.
You told me to write it.
No. But my biggest takeaways is there are some young pieces on this team that I think could really go boom. We're not going to know it. It's going to quote the great Derek Dooley, they're going to water the bamboo, and we'll see if the bamboo grows. Boom. That's what's going to happen with some of these young guys. And I don't mean the Utleys and Campbells. I'm talking Spillman. I'm talking about Matthews, Staley. These are unproven players to this point on the field. Like, they can do it in practice, and that's all good, and that starts there. But it's going to take till September to go, man, that kid actually really good, because you're going against different competition. So that's where I'm at with it through spring. It's like, you want to continue to hear good things. That's what you want to hear, because if you're not hearing it, then that's not good.
Well, I think Eric, the other thing too, when you look at this roster, is in years past, for example, last year, Mike Matthews, but you looked up and you said, well, Brew McCoy's ahead of him. Yep. They brought in Chris Brazzell, Dante Thornton's here, Squirrel White's here. So it was easy to fall in love with Mike Matthews for making plays, Eric, but you also looked at the roster and said, well, there's a lot of veteran guys in front of him that have proven themselves. When you look at this roster this spring, there's a lot of youth, and then there's a lot more youth. Some of these guys that are generating some buzz as young players have to play. Maybe not Campbell as much and Utley as much, but somebody's going to have to play, at the receiver position, and somebody's going to have to step up and be the third tight end in this offense and a young linebacker. They just have to play, because there's not a bunch of veterans in front of them. This is going to be a pretty young football team. So it is a little different when you look at the roster depth this spring compared to last spring, Eric.
Which goes back, Eric, to what we talked about in December and January, when there was the gnashing of teeth that Tennessee wasn't heavy in the portal. And what did we say? Last year's version of, got to rotate more is this year's version of, you put a bunch of money into these young players in NIL, they've got to play. And so they didn't go to the portal real heavy. They're going to say, hey, you're making a big chunk of money in NIL. You've got to play. They're going to push these kids to the field. It goes to receiver. It goes to the offensive line. It goes to several different positions. And I think that's what Hubbs is talking about with the youth that is going to be pushed onto the field, because that's kind of been the battle cry, I think, within the building for the last couple of months.
Yeah, and what does Tennessee look like at cornerback, a couple of weeks from now? We talk about, is Tennessee going to go and get another cornerback in the transfer portal? Spring practice will answer that. Dylan Lewis has been behind Boo Carter at star. You had Trey Petit at corner, and, Ty Redmond at corner, and some of these younger guys. What do they look like as spring practice continues on in full pads? Everybody looks good in shorts. What do these guys look like a week or two from now is what I'm intrigued by. But you got there, and on the offensive line, of course, David Sanders, and you can't hear a bad word about him right now from his – I've written about it every day. You got to have a David Sanders report from a technical standpoint and feet and hand placement and all that. He looks great. What's he look like when he's trying to block Joshua Josephs coming around to sack your quarterback? We're going to find that answer out, over the next couple of weeks when they get back on campus in full pads. So, yeah, these young players, there's no choice. They're going to have to step up. They're going to have to play. They're going to be better for it as well. Moving on throughout, their careers and on into the next year as well. We don't care about that right now. We care about 2025. But I'm excited to see kind of how all these guys transpire. And, take William Satterwhite as well. Talk about the two transfer guards. I wouldn't say Satterwhite's locked down the center position, but everybody who spoke last week, at least on the offensive line or on offense, referred to Sat as the center, taking over for Coop. And, he's not Coop, but he's not a newbie, and this is Sat's job to lose and all that and more. So I mean, he's another one of those young guys I kind of put in this category. It's going to have to step up and play. So that's definitely a storyline this year.
Yeah, I think the other thing for me, right quick, Rob, is you kind of lean towards what players say. No offense to coaches, because coaches are giving coach speak, Rob. But when you talk to people privately, you talk to people on camera and everything, Boo Carter's name continues to show up. People keep talking about Boo Carter and what little bit he's shown at, on offense with the work that he's done there, and obviously where he's at. I think his step from year one to year two is going to be really interesting to watch, and how much will this staff really turn him loose kind of as a two-way player and what all they can do there, because I think he's hit the ground running on offense and a little bit of work based on what players say. And players typically, if they're talking about somebody, Rob, that guy's making an impression on them.
Well, and players typically don't do what Boo did as a freshman in the SEC either, which is, immediately just pop. I'm not saying he, had it all figured out, but it'd be 2 or 3 times a game where just whiz bang, who was that moving so fast, or doing that or making that hit, or like Georgia didn't give up anything in the punt return game at all last year. And what Boo popped one for 34 yards in Athens on a Saturday night. Just little things. Just little things that pop out. He's not a lot of freshmen pop out in this league, and he popped out. Did it with the ball in his hands, and Josh Chappell's a smart guy. I'm not surprised that he's getting a look over there.
The Tennessee football continuing spring practice, not this week on spring break, but 4 in the books. They'll come back, continue with full pads next week, and of course we'll have coverage right here at Volquest.com. Last little thing we want to hit on before we say goodbye on a Tuesday morning, Brent Hubbs, Tennessee baseball, man. 20-0 on the season, 3-0, coming off a sweep of number 7 Florida at the time. A little top 10 showdown made it look easy. And here's the thing, Florida played really well this weekend. They had one horrific inning on Saturday, and they gave up 2 timely hits late in Sunday's game. Florida played really well, and Kevin O'Sullivan was just begging to get thrown out on Sunday because you could just see the frustrations boiling over, which is like, well, I do this, I've got a shorthanded club, I've got all these injuries, yet we're still in position every game to win, and then Tennessee just keeps coming and coming and coming. And Tennessee was really impressive this past weekend and moved up to number 1 in D1 baseball polls. So now Tennessee's the consensus number 1 team in the country. Heading into the second SEC series, first true road series at Alabama this weekend.
Well, I think the biggest takeaway from me from this weekend is twofold. One, this team, like Tony Vitello's teams seem to do, but particularly at home, they answer the bell, from the 6th inning on, right? You get that game, you get it in a 1-run game in the 6th inning, and Tennessee's down by 1, you like where Tennessee's setting.
Yeah.
Because they've just seemingly always had that ability to make a play, particularly on their home field. And that was what showed up, right? That's what happened Saturday when they erupted in the 7th. It's what happened on Sunday. They got great work from Snead out of the bullpen. But my biggest takeaway is the storyline from this weekend wasn't that Liam Dole was the best thing that everybody's talking about in the pitching. He didn't pitch bad, but it wasn't like Liam Dole and then they piecemealed it. He was solid on Friday night. He didn't pitch. He didn't have as much command as he seemingly has had, but he's not the storyline of pitching this weekend for Tennessee, in my opinion, and that's my biggest takeaway.
Marcus Phillips, baby.
He was incredible on Saturday, and there's been questions about can he be sustained as a starter, and will his velo continue to be there in the 5th or 6th inning? In the 7th inning, he threw 95. Marcus Phillips just continues to prove doubters like myself at times. I'm a Marcus Phillips fan, but I'm like everybody else. I have serious questions about him going into SEC play, and that's his SEC opener in terms of a starting pitcher. Man, he was phenomenal. 7 strikeouts, 1 walk, 110 pitches. Again, the velo didn't dip. His off speed was there. He looked awesome. So that 100%, that's the biggest takeaway from this weekend in terms of, your team is legit. Your team is heading in the right direction. It's your number 2 starter that has all the talent in the world, but failed to have consistency a year ago, and you still got some questions about him this year. did that against a really solid Florida team. Huge takeaway. And then to your point about Liam Doyle, man, like I continue to use the word labored, and I'm sorry I can't find another word that kind of fits. But all of us up there in the press box are just joking. It's like we're worn out just watching him throw because every pitch from the second inning on was like high stress, high leverage, taking the hat off, getting the sweat off his forehead. And I mean, he truly labored. And again, you look up there, it's like, man, Liam Doyle didn't have his stuff. He gave up 1 run on 3 hits in 4 2/3. He was good. It's just, sometimes it's not going to be all dominant. And I thought Tennessee did a great job. Dylan Lloyd was fantastic this weekend. Nate Snead was incredible. Really good pitching-wise this weekend against a pretty solid Florida team that's a bit banged up, but still a really good Florida team.
Do you know who Marcus Phillips is, Eric King?
Who is he?
He's every one of these players we just talked about in football that had not proven he could do it yet.
Yeah.
And then he just did it this weekend against Florida. Now, can he continue to do it? We'll see. But he certainly answered the bell in an SEC game, went 7 strong innings. Had they not had that long 7th inning and they had to go into the 8th, and if it had just been, they scored 1 or 2, maybe he comes back out for the 8th. Who knows? But you didn't have to. But I just go back to I think some of these kids are just what we're talking about in football, and he's one of them. Until you go out and show you and prove it, you're going to have those doubters because it's easy. That's the easy thing to do and go, I'm not sure he can do it. Because he's not done.
That's a great point. That is a really great point. Again, Marcus Phillips, all the talent in the world, but you hadn't seen it yet, and now you're seeing it. So I think that's a really, really good point. Another takeaway, Brent, I had this weekend, I think Phillips was the biggest takeaway. I love where Tennessee is kind of behind the plate right now. You look at Cannon Peebles, his average isn't where he wants it to be, but Stone Lawless defensively has been fantastic. Tony puts in Cannon in the 5th inning, and in the 6th inning, he has the biggest hit of the weekend, or at least in Game 3, the 2-run double there to put Tennessee ahead for good. I think Tennessee went from a couple years ago having no catchers, having a left fielder be your catcher, and then now having 2 guys that should be playing every game for the number 1 ranked team in the country. Again, what a position to be in.
Yeah, I mean, and look, they've got depth all over the place. I mean, and again, they've got a great blend of transfers, veterans, and youth. I mean, how do you not love everything that Abernathy is? Like, oh my God, this guy's like, his at bat in the 7th and on Saturday to extend that inning was just what a veteran at bat he had. Then on Sunday, he crashes the wall, he throws a guy out at the plate, like everything about him. We were like, wow, okay, this guy's gonna be just
goes from first to third on a base hit to left field, coming in to score on an RBI ground out the next at bat. Just little stuff like that.
Yeah. He has a very high baseball IQ, and it plays the game like a veteran, not like a young player. He's been true. I love this kid. I think he's going to be a blast to watch. I do want you to explain right quick, Eric. I know we're about done here. I've seen a lot of people talk about this, some on the message board, some on Twitter, kind of taken perplexed at Tony's decision on pitching on Sunday. Why did that become a bullpen game? Coons was just rolling right along. Can you kind of let everybody know why they went the direction they went and got Coons out of the game as early as they did, given how well he was throwing the baseball and the command he seemed to have?
Yeah, I'm like a lot of people where I'm just kind of like, come on, just let him go. I wrote about in the 3-2-1 yesterday. The fact of the matter was he was on a pitch count, and they wanted to let him go through the order one time. And I think that they got some serious training wheels on him right now. And Tennessee, Frank Anderson and Tony Vitello typically always side in the air of caution than just throwing guys into the wind if you don't have to, because they have so many guys in the bullpen that, 1, needed to work, and 2, is capable of piecing it together for a Game 3 series. But so I think they kind of went into it knowing like, hey, 2nd start ever, 5th ever appearance, first SEC start. Let's get you through the lineup one time, and then we'll piece it together behind you. And I think they went in with that mindset. They started getting guys up and warm and hot in the 2nd inning for him, and they just kind of stuck with the plan. But to your point, he threw 37 pitches in his first start in Houston against Arizona. He threw 33 on Sunday in a career high 2 2/3. So he could have went on, and I'm hoping that they continue to extend him and let him go a little bit because AJ Russell's not going to be pitching in games for at least the next couple of weeks. you don't have a true number 3 starter, I think that should be Tegan Coons. Let him go 4 innings next time, or at least let him continue to get out there and rolling. But to answer your question, they had a plan. They stuck to the plan, and I'm like everybody else, like, just let him go, man. He looked great.
He was throwing it pretty good. I mean, he was. Hats off to Dylan Loy. Came in and pitched really well. Tanner Franklin got a lesson this weekend about the level. I mean, he's got to find a different gear, coming out of the bullpen. But I thought Dylan Loy was terrific on Sunday as well. I mean, really, really, his growth and his evolution under Frank Anderson is not a surprise because that's what we've seen pitchers do in this program.
I mean, if anybody hasn't seen him yet this year, and you saw him last year, I mean, he looks like a different guy. I mean, he's put on like at least 20 pounds of good weight. And he's going to be that guy they use multiple times in the bullpen every weekend, kind of like Kirby. And with all due respect to Kirby, who was phenomenal as a Tennessee legend, I mean, Louis got a little bit different outlook, on the mound in terms of what he can throw. So he's been really, really good, and I'm glad that, I mean, that was already his 8th appearance on the year after missing the first 2 weeks of the year. I mean, that goes to show you how much they like him. So Tennessee baseball, really good. Now it's going to continue. It's not going to get any easier. On the road at number 12 Alabama, first true road series of the year. That's going to be Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So kind of an altered schedule this weekend. So there's some challenges there. Looking forward to seeing what Tennessee looks like on the road this weekend. And tonight against ETSU, people like us, we track these things. They could tie the program record for 23 straight wins, dating back to last season. They won the last 2 games of the year. And that's on the line today. And, of course, if they win that one against a team that hits a whole lot of home runs, ETSU, they could have a chance to break it this weekend.
Haven't lost a series since last year at Alabama. Haven't lost back-to-back games since last year at Alabama. Have a chance to come full circle this weekend against the Tide in Tuscaloosa.
What a stupid stat.
It really is. It really is. The back-to-back games thing, especially.
I mean, when you talk about Rob, I mean, you talk about the number of games you play and the competition you're playing every week. To not let one get away from you on a Sunday afternoon in SEC play, to lose a series and to not lose back-to-back games in a year. I mean, come on, that's pretty ridiculous.
It's crazy. Obviously, I was in Nashville and didn't see hardly an inning of it this weekend. But my biggest comment on it, or to tell people, just kind of illuminate Hubbard. We talk about it all the time, but where this program is, can't tell you how many iPads, computers, iPhones were propped up watching Tennessee baseball. Back in underneath in the media work areas, or even Tennessee fans checking the scores, which 10 years ago, unthinkable. And it's people on press row while the game is going on. A lot. I'm not talking about a couple of diehards. I'm talking about multiple people all over the place, and it's fans and people talking about the game, and it's again unthinkable that this program.
And then the flip side of it, Rob, I'm walking in the stadium on Friday evening, and literally everybody I walk by, we're all got a nose in our phones watching as we're trying to navigate through Lindsey Nelson Stadium. So there's that. I didn't cover the game on Saturday, but I was told by people who were actually up there doing their jobs in the press box that when the national anthem concluded, that was when the final buzzer sounded in Nashville with Tennessee and Auburn. So you got a great round of applause for the national anthem, like always, and then it was amplified because Tennessee had just knocked off Auburn. So really, really cool sports weekend for Tennessee, and excited to see what this weekend holds. Tennessee basketball in the NCAA tournaments and Tennessee baseball on the road at Alabama should be a whole lot of fun. No better place to cover it than to catch up and to stay up to date than right here at Volquest.com. Brent Hubbs, right now, $1 for 7 days. You can try us out. If you like us, come back and be a subscriber, but $1 to try us out. There's no better time to try us out with everything going on than right here or right now at Volquest.com.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, obviously, subscribe to us on YouTube if you're watching there. We certainly appreciate that. And if you're a podcast listening on the podcast, we appreciate that. But there's a whole different level of coverage that takes place every day at Volquest. So if you're not a subscriber and you're only keeping up through the podcast, we appreciate you keeping up there, but we encourage you to check out the site. I don't think you're going to be disappointed with our coverage. Just terrific stuff all weekend long, but between football, baseball, and basketball, and it's going to be that way this weekend and this week as well. and then we'll get back into football and baseball, and hopefully basketball is continuing. So it's a great month and a great time to check us out at a great price.
$1 for 7 days. Check us out at Volquest.com. And big thanks to Exterior Home Solutions for being the presenting sponsor of this Volquest podcast. You can check them out by dialing 865-524-5888. That is a free estimate, 865-524-5888. Go to exteriorhomesolutions.com. See some testimonials, see some videos. They do some fantastic work. Again, that is Exterior Home Solutions. For Rob Lewis, Brent Hubbs, Austin Price, I am Eric Kane. Thank you so much for joining us here on a Tuesday morning on the Volquest Podcast.